Have you ever heard of a man who faced the greatest empire in history and refused to kneel, even when everything seemed lost? Decimus, the last of the Samnites, didn't just challenge Rome. He became an immortal legend. Imagine facing an enemy that controls almost the entire known world, with relentless armies and strategies that crush any resistance. Most would have given up, but Decimus chose to fight. Why? Because, to him, freedom was worth more than life itself. This isn't just a story of war. It's about honor, courage, and a man who carried the fate of an entire people on his shoulders. As Rome sought to crush the Samnites, Decimus turned every defeat into a symbol of resistance. He proved that willpower can echo louder than the roar of the legions. But what made this Samnite warrior keep going when all seemed lost? What strategies did he use to defy the invincible? And above all, why does his name still inspire those who fight against oppression? Get ready to uncover the secrets of a fight that Rome could never erase. Today's video dives into the story of Decimus, a man who resisted until his last breath, becoming a symbol of invulnerability. Discover the battles he fought, the sacrifices he made, and how his struggle echoes to this day. If stories of courage like this inspire you, give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. That way, you help us bring more epic tales like Decimus to the world, and keep the flame of these legends alive. It began as a seemingly one-sided conflict. Rome, the unstoppable giant of the ancient world, expanded its grip over the Italian peninsula, viewing smaller nations like the Samnites as mere stepping stones. Yet, Decimus, a warrior whose name would later ignite a fire of resistance, saw things differently. Born amidst the rugged terrain of Samnium, he witnessed firsthand how his people were underestimated. Rome's legions marched with confidence, certain of their superiority, yet the Samnites knew these mountains better than anyone. Decimus turned this knowledge into their first weapon, crafting ambushes and traps that left Roman generals perplexed. The mountains themselves became silent allies in this fight. Roman formations, disciplined and precise, faltered on the uneven terrain. Decimus understood that Rome's strength was its structure, and he shattered it by turning their environment against them. But his leadership wasn't just tactical. Decimus inspired the Samnites to see themselves as more than survivors. He made them warriors. Rome, for all its power, now faced a force united not by numbers but by sheer will. And yet, even with this initial success, the question lingered. How could Decimus hope to sustain this resistance against an empire with endless resources? This question wasn't lost on Decimus. To fight Rome, he needed more than strategy, he needed allies. Thus began his efforts to unite the fractious Samnite tribes. These tribes, proud and fiercely independent, often fought each other as much as any external enemy. But Decimus knew that division was a luxury they could no longer afford. His vision of unity wasn't just about survival. It was a defiance of Rome's narrative that the Samnites were too disorganized to pose a real threat. Could unity truly be achieved, though, in a land so accustomed to discord? As Decimus worked to bridge these divides, he also prepared for the inevitable retaliation. Rome would not let this rebellion go unchecked. The legions, humiliated and vengeful, would return with even greater force. Decimus anticipated this, but he also recognized that resistance would require not just strength, but adaptability. If the Samnites were to survive what came next, their strategies would have to evolve. How could one man lead his people into a war that seemed destined to consume them? The answer lay in Decimus' next bold move. Decimus was both a warrior and a diplomat, a paradox that Rome struggled to comprehend. On the battlefield, he was ferocious, leading daring raids that struck fear into even the most seasoned Roman soldiers. Yet off the battlefield, he worked tirelessly to forge alliances. He understood that brute force alone could not win this war. The Samnites needed unity and the support of neighboring tribes. But this duality wasn't without its challenges. Many saw his diplomatic efforts as weakness, questioning if a warrior should spend time negotiating. The paradox deepened as Decimus began to experiment with new tactics. He alternated between open confrontation and shadow warfare, keeping Rome perpetually off balance. One day, his forces would strike with unmatched brutality, leaving Roman supply lines in ruins. The next, they would vanish into the mountains, leaving no trace for the legions to follow. This unpredictability frustrated Rome's commanders, who struggled to adapt their rigid strategies to a foe who refused to play by their rules. Yet, among the Samnites, these shifting tactics created tension. How could Decimus convince his people that such contradictions were their greatest strength? These questions grew louder as the resistance wore on. The Samnites had suffered losses, and doubt began to creep in. Decimus, however, remained steadfast, using every setback as an opportunity to rally his people. He reframed each defeat as a lesson, each victory as proof that their cause was just. Yet, even as his leadership strengthened their resolve, Decimus knew that time was not on their side. The weight of Rome's resources loomed ever larger. Could the Samnites outlast an empire that never seemed to tire? Decimus' ability to lead through contradictions extended to his relationships with other tribal leaders. He walked a fine line between asserting his authority and respecting their autonomy, knowing that his vision of unity could crumble under the weight of egos and old rivalries. This balancing act was exhausting, but Decimus saw no alternative. He believed that their survival depended on it. Yet, as Rome intensified its efforts, the stakes grew higher. What would happen when diplomacy and tactics were no longer enough? This question would soon be answered as Decimus faced his most critical decision yet. Rome's legions were closing in, and the Samnites were running out of places to retreat. Would Decimus choose to fight to the bitter end, or could there still be another path forward? The mountains that had once shielded the Samnites now became a prison. Rome's legions advanced relentlessly, cutting off escape routes and forcing Decimus into a choice no leader ever wants to face. He could surrender, ensuring the survival of his people under Roman rule, or he could make one final stand, knowing it might cost everything. For Decimus, there was no hesitation. Surrender would mean submission, and submission would mean the death of the Samnite spirit. The decision was made. They would hold their ground at a fortified mountain stronghold. This fortress, strategically perched atop a sheer cliff, was their last hope. Supplies were low, morale was fragile, and the odds were impossible. Yet Decimus moved with unwavering resolve, personally overseeing the defenses and rallying his warriors with words that resonated like a battle cry. "We are the mountain, and the mountain does not bow." The days that followed were a brutal test of endurance. Rome's siege machines roared, their soldiers climbed the walls in waves, yet the Samnites held firm. Every skirmish, every repelled attack was a defiance of Rome's dominance. Inside the stronghold, the air was thick with tension. Decimus' leadership was all that kept the Samnites from breaking under the pressure. He walked among his warriors, sharing their food and hardships, reminding them of what they were fighting for. Each battle brought heavy losses, but it also inspired stories of unmatched bravery. Still, as the siege dragged on, cracks began to show. Supplies dwindled to nothing, and the exhausted warriors questioned whether holding this ground was worth their lives. What was Decimus' plan, they asked, and could he truly see them through this nightmare? The answer came not in words, but in action. Decimus ordered a daring counterattack under the cover of night, targeting the heart of Rome's siege operation. It was a desperate gamble, but it succeeded in delaying the inevitable. Yet even this victory came at a cost. The Samnites were now too weak to continue resisting for much longer. Decimus faced an impossible truth. Their final stand had bought time, but time alone would not win this war. What would Decimus do when there was no fortress left to defend, no warriors left to fight? As the walls of the stronghold finally fell, Decimus made a choice that shocked even his enemies. He ordered his surviving warriors to retreat, disappearing into the wilderness where Rome's legions could not follow. For Decimus, the fight wasn't over. It had simply taken a new form. The Samnites would not be defeated on the battlefield. but through attrition and resilience. They would scatter, blending into the mountains and valleys they knew so well, and continue resisting in ways Rome could never fully suppress. Rome, however, had learned a hard lesson. The Samnites had proven that resistance could not be measured in battles won or lost. Decimus had forced Rome to reconsider its strategies, to adapt to a kind of warfare it had long underestimated. Though Rome would eventually claim victory, it came at a price far greater than anticipated. The Samnites, once dismissed as a minor obstacle, became a symbol of resistance that inspired future generations. Decimus' leadership had turned a hopeless cause into something far more enduring, a legacy. Even within Rome's ranks, there was a grudging respect for the man who had defied them so completely. His name was whispered among soldiers as a reminder that even the greatest empire could be challenged by sheer willpower. Yet for Decimus, the legacy wasn't the goal. His fight had always been for freedom, for the right of his people to exist without subjugation. What Decimus had left behind was not just a story of defiance, but a question that lingered long after the war ended. What makes a resistance truly unbreakable? Is it the courage of one man, the unity of a people, or something deeper that empires can never conquer? Decimus' journey leaves us wondering how far we would go for the ideals we hold dear, and what sacrifices we might be willing to make to defend them. As we've seen, Decimus' resilience became a legend, a symbol of unbreakable resistance against one of the greatest empires in history. But what does it take for a warrior to never be defeated? If Decimus' story sparked the question of what makes a resistance truly unbreakable, then you'll want to dive into the untold story of Tarquinius, the Roman soldier who never lost. Was his invincibility a result of divine luck, unmatched skill, or something more mysterious? Find out in our next video, where we uncover the true story behind this legendary warrior who defied the odds and lived to tell the tale. Click here to watch.